The Triton was a ship no one remembered, a vessel barely a speck in the vast expanse of space, its hull battered from countless battles, but never recognized as more than a secondary ship, nothing more than a pawn in the war between humanity and the alien Confederation. It had no remarkable features, nothing that set it apart from the hundreds of other ships that served as the backbone of the fleet. It wasn't fast, it wasn't powerful, it was often relegated to the most mundane of tasks, delivering supplies, running reconnaissance, and serving as a decoy for more important missions. The crew of the Triton were seasoned veterans, each one of them having served on various ships throughout the years. But no matter how hard they worked, no matter how much blood, sweat, and tears they poured into their roles, they knew the truth. Their ship was the least impressive one in the entire fleet. They were the underdogs, the ones others looked down on. Captain Eleanor Hayes stood on the command deck, looking out at the stars beyond the viewports, her mind racing with thoughts of the mission ahead. She was a woman of integrity, a leader who believed in her crew. But even she couldn't deny the mounting frustration she felt. The fleet's commanders had given her little to work with. Her ship was underpowered, her resources were limited, and the constant reminder from the higher-ups that her crew was nothing more than a supporting cast in a larger game had begun to wear her thin. But she held her head high. She would find a way to prove them wrong, no matter the odds. The crew went about their duties with quiet professionalism, moving in synchronized harmony as they prepared for their latest assignment, another simple task on the list of jobs no one else wanted. But as the days passed and the Triton drifted further into uncharted space, a sudden transmission crackled through the comm system. The urgency in the voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Fleet Command. The Triton had been ordered to respond to an unexpected emergency. The flagship had been ambushed by an overwhelming alien force, and its systems were severely damaged. The Triton was the only available ship nearby with enough capability to carry out a critical mission. The crew froze for a moment as the message filtered through the command deck. There was no time to waste. They had been given an impossible task to destroy an alien supply base deep in Confederation territory. The Triton's mission was simple and yet absurd in its scope: infiltrate enemy lines and eliminate the base before it could be used to launch a new wave of attacks against human forces. It was a mission that no one expected to succeed, but Fleet Command had no other options, and so the Triton was tasked with carrying out the impossible. The crew gathered in the briefing room, where Captain Hayes gave her orders with calm resolve. She had been through worse before she knew that the Triton had been written off by many, but it was time to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of if they had the right opportunity. And so, with little fanfare and no assurances of success, the Triton set its course toward the heart of enemy territory. No one expected much from them, but the crew knew one thing for certain: they would give everything they had and more. They would not be forgotten. The Triton surged through space, its engines humming a low and steady rhythm as the crew prepared for their most critical mission. Yet Captain Hayes stood in the command chair, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes scanning the tactical display in front of her. The stars outside the viewport were mere pinpricks of light in the cold blackness of space, but to Hayes they felt like the weight of the universe pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel the tension among the crew. Each one of them had heard the same thing from Fleet Command, the words that had echoed in every officer's mind: impossible mission. There was no way the Triton could succeed, not with its outdated systems and lack of firepower. Yet here they were, one of the most underpowered ships in the fleet, expected to take down an enemy supply base that was heavily fortified and defended by alien warships far more advanced than anything they had encountered before. But there was no turning back now. The orders had been given, and it was her responsibility to lead her crew to the best of her ability. No matter the odds, she needed to put aside the fear, the uncertainty, and show the crew that they still had something left in them, something that made them dangerous in their own right. Captain, we're approaching the coordinates, Lieutenant Davis called from his station on the bridge, his voice a mix of professionalism and the lingering concern they all felt. Understood, Hayes replied, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension in her own chest tightening. Prepare for combat maneuvers. We don't know what's waiting for us out there, but we'll deal with it when we arrive. The ship's systems came online with a series of soft beeps and clicks. The crew ran through their checks one last time. The weapons were powered up, the shields adjusted to optimal levels, and the cloaking system was ready, though Hayes wasn't sure if it would be enough to get them through the mission. "All systems are green," Davis added, his tone more confident now. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." Hayes took a deep breath and gave the order, "All hands brace for impact. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." The Triton glided silently through the darkness as it neared the enemy base, located on a barren moon. In the middle of a remote star system ahead of them was a sprawling complex with towering structures and defense turrets scattered across the surface. The supply base was surrounded by a heavily armed fleet of alien ships that looked almost like they had been built for war and war alone. "This isn't going to be easy," Lieutenant Marks said from the tactical console, his fingers flying across the controls as he analyzed the enemy formations. "They've got a heavy defense grid in place. It's going to take a lot to break through." "Then we break through," Hayes said, her voice firm. "We need to destroy that base and cripple their ability to retaliate. Our forces are counting on us." The Triton edged closer to the moon as the enemy fleet remained unaware of their presence, thanks to the ship's cloaking systems. For now, they were invisible, but Hayes knew they couldn't stay that way for long. Once they fired their weapons, all bets were off. "All right, crew, this is it," Hayes said as she turned to face them all. "Stay sharp and keep your wits about you. We're not here to play games, we're here to finish the job." As the final preparations were made, the Triton drifted closer to the enemy's outer perimeter. The crew knew they were outmatched in terms of firepower, but there was one thing they had that no one could account for: human ingenuity. The Triton might have been the fleet's weakest ship, but its crew was anything but. With a steady hand, Hayes gave the command to engage the base's outer defenses. "Let's show them what we're made of." The Triton emerged from its cloaking field, its sleek frame cutting through the void toward the alien base. The moon ahead loomed like a silent giant, its surface pockmarked with craters and the sharp shadows of industrial structures. For a moment, everything was eerily quiet. The crew held their breath, knowing that the slightest misstep would alert the enemy. This wasn't just a mission of destruction, it was a fight for survival. Approaching the perimeter, Lieutenant Davis reported, his eyes flicking over the data streams flooding his console. "Sensors show a full defensive grid in place. We'll be in their radar range within 5 minutes." Captain Hayes stood at the center of the command deck, her posture straight as a line. "Take us in slow. Keep us under the radar as long as possible," she ordered. "We don't engage until we're on top of them." "Understood," Davis replied. His hands worked quickly on the controls, adjusting the ship's course. The Triton crept forward, as silent as a shadow, its cloaking device keeping it just beyond the reach of the enemy sensors. The base itself was massive, twice the size of any human military installation, and heavily fortified with automated defense turrets, energy shields, and a fleet of alien ships stationed around the moon. It was exactly as the intelligence reports had predicted, maybe even worse. The crew couldn't afford to make a single mistake. "We've got a clear path to the central power core," Lieutenant Marks reported, his voice tense as he studied the tactical display. "But there's a high risk of detection once we hit the perimeter defense network." "Then we hit hard and fast," Hayes said, her tone unwavering. "We get in, do the job, and get out before they have a chance to retaliate. No second chances." The crew nodded, a collective understanding passing between them. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was their chance to prove their worth. For too long, they had been underestimated. Now it was their time to rise. As they neared the base, the Triton entered the outer rings of the enemy's defense grid. There was a brief moment of stillness, like the calm before a storm. The ship's AI, Nova, hummed softly, its systems clicking into place. The alien technology that had merged with the Triton since their last encounter had been subtle but effective. The once sluggish ship now moved with surprising agility, its systems operating at levels that even the crew didn't fully understand. "Activate the pulse disruptor," Hayes ordered. "We need to knock out their outer defenses before they can react." "Pulse disruptor ready," Marks confirmed. He hit a series of keys, sending a powerful electromagnetic pulse toward the enemy's outer grid. There was a brief flash on the radar. Then the energy shields around the base flickered and dimmed. The Triton had successfully disabled a key section of their defensive perimeter. "Now's our chance," Hayes said, her voice sharp as she stood up straighter, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "All weapons ready, engage the turrets." "Firing," Marks replied, his fingers moving with practiced speed. The ship's newly upgraded energy weapons erupted with a sudden burst of light, striking the base's defense turrets with pinpoint accuracy. The alien turrets, once a formidable threat, crumbled under the force of the Triton's firepower. "Direct hit. Shields are down on the outer defenses," Davis confirmed. "Excellent," Hayes said, a fierce pride swelling inside her. "Keep pushing forward, but maintain stealth. We can't afford to let the entire fleet know we're here." The Triton pressed deeper into the base, cutting through the once impenetrable defenses as though they were paper. The alien ships in orbit began to react, launching sorties toward the Triton, but by then it was too late. The crew was already on the move, using the ship's new cloaking system and advanced weaponry to stay one step ahead of the enemy. "We're inside," Marks reported as they reached the central power core. The ship's scanners detected the core deep beneath the surface of the base. It was a massive structure, surrounded by thick layers of alien security. "Prepare for insertion," Hayes commanded. "This is the moment. We hit them hard, disable the core, and get out. Move quickly and be ready for anything." The tension on the bridge was palpable as the Triton neared its final target. The crew knew the risks, but there was no turning back now. The base was within reach, and the fate of the mission, and perhaps the war, rested on their shoulders. The Triton's hull shuddered as it blasted through the final layers of the alien base's security, entering deeper into the heart of the enemy's territory. The crew had done it. They'd slipped past the outer defenses, destroyed the turrets, and now they were just moments away from reaching their primary target, the central power core. But Hayes knew the hardest part was still ahead of them. They had no idea what awaited in the base's depths. The moment they activated their weapons again, all hell would break loose. Approaching the power core, Lieutenant Marks announced, his voice steady but taut. "We're under the base now. It's heavily shielded." "Don't stop now," Hayes urged, her focus unbroken. She stared at the holographic map projected before her. "We've come too far to back down. Prepare to deploy the charges." The mission had always been about speed and precision. They had no time for a prolonged fight. They would plant the explosives on the core, trigger the detonations, and get out as fast as they could. The alien forces wouldn't be caught off guard again. Their retaliation would be swift and brutal. "Charges prepped," Marks confirmed, his fingers flying across the tactical console. "The core's primary reactor is exposed. We can plant the charges right under it." Hayes nodded. "Good. We'll hit them at their heart." They had planned for every contingency, or so they thought. But as the Triton neared the reactor chamber, a new threat emerged on the radar. A wave of alien warships, fast and brutal, appeared from the far side of the moon, converging on their position. Their arrival wasn't a coincidence. They had been lying in wait, prepared for the Triton's approach. The sudden appearance of the enemy fleet was no surprise to Hayes. She'd expected it, but the reality of the situation was far worse than any prediction. "Enemy fleet inbound," Davis reported, his voice rising with urgency. "They're locking onto us." "Not good," Marks muttered, glancing at the ships closing in. "There are too many of them. We won't be able to outrun them with our shields down." The Triton was in danger, trapped between the imminent explosion of the power core and the overwhelming force of the alien fleet. The ship was no longer the quiet underdog. It was now the hunted. "Activate the secondary cloaking system," Hayes ordered. "We need to buy ourselves some time. Get us out of here, fast." The crew scrambled into action, their training taking over. The cloaking system hummed to life, and the Triton vanished from the sensors of the enemy fleet. But the alien ships were relentless, and they had already begun scanning the area with wide-range sensors. The Triton wouldn't stay hidden for long. "Time to plant the charges," Hayes said, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding. "Marks, do it now." Marks wasted no time. He moved swiftly to the charge deployment panel, tapping a few buttons before sending the explosives into the power core's central chamber. The detonators were set, and the timer began its countdown. "We have 30 minutes, Marks reported, turning toward Hayes. "After that, the core goes up, and we're out of time. Davis, take us out of here. Full throttle." "We can't wait for the fleet to get in range," Hayes ordered, gripping the armrests of her chair. "On it, Captain," Davis replied, his hands moving swiftly over the controls as the Triton shot away from the power core, heading for a nearby asteroid field to mask their retreat. But just as the ship turned to flee, the alien warships detected the Triton's presence. Weapons fire streaked across space, splintering the asteroid field around them. A few shots impacted the Triton, but the ship's reinforced hull and upgraded shields absorbed the damage. The crew barely flinched. "We've got company," Davis said with a grimace, punching in evasive maneuvers. "Brace for impact." The Triton dodged and weaved through the asteroid field, narrowly avoiding the laser fire from the enemy warships. The explosion of the core was imminent, and they couldn't afford to be caught in the blast radius. The crew was moving fast, but time was running out. Captain Hayes watched the clock counting down. There was no more time for second guesses. They had to outrun the explosion. They had to get out. "Davis, take us into that canyon," Hayes commanded, pointing at a narrow passage between two asteroids. "It's our only chance." With his eyes fixed on the holographic map, Davis steered the Triton into the canyon, the ship's engine screaming as it threaded the needle between the rock walls. The alien ships followed, but they couldn't keep up in the narrow space. Their fire missed by mere inches as the Triton dove deeper into the twisting tunnel. "We're almost there," Hayes said, her grip tightening on the chair. "Stay focused." The countdown ticked closer to 0, and the canyon narrowed. The Triton needed to be out before the explosion, or they'd all be caught in the blast. The canyon walls were closing in around them, the Triton's engines roaring as it shot through the narrow passage with all the speed it could muster. The alien warships were relentless, staying right on their tail. Each shot they fired blasted through the canyon with terrifying precision, causing debris to ricochet off the walls. A few chunks of rock tore into the Triton's shields, but the ship held firm, its reinforced hull and advanced defenses keeping the crew safe, at least for now. "Keep it steady, Davis," Hayes barked, her voice sharp with urgency as the ship bucked and jolted through the twisting canyon. Her eyes flicked to the countdown timer on the main screen. 15 minutes. They were running out of time, and the closer they got to the end of the canyon, the harder it would be to escape. The Triton wasn't built for agility in confined spaces, but Davis was proving himself more than capable. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he never hesitated, his hands moving fluidly over the controls. "I got this, Captain," Davis replied through gritted teeth, his focus unwavering. "But we're gonna have company soon. Those alien ships are smart. They'll cut us off." "We don't have a choice," Hayes said, her gaze hardening as she watched the approaching alien ships close in. "We push through. We don't stop." As if on cue, an explosion rang out behind them, and the Triton jolted violently as debris exploded from the canyon walls. A large piece of rock ricocheted off the ship's hull, sending a shockwave through the command deck. "Shields down to 60%, Marks reported from his station, his eyes wide. "We can't take many more of those." "We're not stopping," Hayes said, her voice like steel. "Not for anything. Prepare the second evasive maneuver, Davis. We're going to need every ounce of speed we've got." Davis didn't respond, his hands already moving to initiate the evasive program. He pulled the Triton into a sharp left turn, the ship's thrusters pushing it sideways, narrowly dodging another barrage of fire from the pursuing warships. The canyon walls loomed ahead, but now they were twisting in ways that made the course more difficult to navigate. "They're getting closer," Marks warned, his fingers dancing over the tactical console, trying to assess the incoming alien fleet's movements. "If they corner us in here, it's over." "We're not getting cornered," Hayes said, her voice cold and determined. "Trust your training. Trust your ship. We've beaten the odds this far. We're not going to stop now." With a final burst of speed, the Triton shot through the remaining length of the canyon, narrowly avoiding another barrage of fire. The alien ships had closed in around the exit, but the Triton was already ahead of them, exiting the canyon at a sharp angle. Hayes looked up, seeing the vast expanse of space stretch before them. The asteroid field was still there, but it was their only route of escape. The Triton was faster now, more agile than it had ever been, but the alien fleet was not far behind. "Davis, we need to pull a hard turn," Hayes commanded. "Bring us around to the far side of the field. We'll use the asteroids as cover." The plan was risky. If they didn't make it to the cover of the asteroids in time, the Triton would be sitting duck. But it was their only shot. Davis nodded grimly. "On it, Captain." He pushed the Triton into a tight, almost impossible turn, the ship's engines groaning in protest as it angled toward the asteroid field. The enemy warships followed, but they were slower to react, giving the Triton precious seconds. Hayes could see the bright flash of their weapons as they fired toward them, but the ship ducked into the asteroid field, weaving between the rocks like a predator. "We're in the field," Davis said, his hand steady on the controls. "But they're still coming. We'll give them a reason to think twice," Hayes said, narrowing her eyes. "Mark, I want a full scan of the enemy fleet. Find me their weak points." Marks didn't hesitate. His fingers flew over the console, pulling up the alien fleet's formation. "The lead ship is vulnerable at the rear engines," he reported. "If we can hit it with a direct shot, we might disable it." "Get me a clean shot," Hayes ordered. "This is our last chance to take them out." The Triton darted between asteroids, staying low to avoid detection. The enemy fleet followed, but they were becoming increasingly cautious as they maneuvered into the field, aware that the Triton was using the terrain to its advantage. Hayes knew the moment to strike was approaching. It was now or never. "Ready the weapons," she said, gripping the armrests. "Once we have a clear shot, we take it. Full power to the forward lasers." "Ready, Captain," Marks confirmed. "We'll have it in 30 seconds." The seconds dragged by like hours as the Triton closed the distance, its heart racing, its weapons powered up, and its crew united by a single goal. 30 seconds, Hayes said. "We do this together. Aim for the weak spot, and don't miss." The seconds felt like an eternity as the Triton weaved through the asteroid field, the crew's every move sensed to the pulse of the ship. Hayes could feel the weight of the moment settling in. This was the turning point. If they didn't land a perfect shot on the lead alien warship, the entire mission and their lives would be lost. It wasn't just about completing the mission anymore. It was about survival. 30 seconds, Mark said, his voice low but urgent as his fingers danced across the console, aligning the targeting systems with the enemy's weak spot. "We're almost there. They won't be expecting us to strike from this angle." "Good," Hayes replied, her eyes locked on the tactical display. "Davis, we need full maneuverability. No more dodging. We're taking them down head-on." Davis's grip tightened on the controls. "Got it, Captain. Full speed ahead." The Triton surged forward, cutting through the asteroid field with precision. The alien ships were closing in on them, but they were still wary of the asteroid terrain. The alien warships were powerful, but they weren't built for the narrow, twisting paths of the field. That was where the Triton had the advantage. The alien fleet had made one mistake. They'd underestimated the human ship's maneuverability. "Target locked," Mark said, his fingers finalizing the calculations. "We've got the shot." The Triton's forward cannons hummed, their energy building up, preparing for the strike that would decide everything. Hayes could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The alien fleet was closing in, but the Triton was in perfect position. The lead alien warship's engines, its weakest point, were now within reach. "Ready, Captain," Mark said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Fire," Hayes commanded, her voice unwavering. The blast was immediate, a bright beam of energy tearing through the cold void of space. The shot struck the lead alien ship's rear engines, just as they had planned. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The beam hit its target with devastating accuracy, and the alien warship's engines detonated in a violent explosion. The ship's massive frame shuddered, its once pristine hull now riddled with gaps where the energy blast had torn through. The alien vessel lurched, its systems failing as it drifted helplessly in space. The crew of the Triton let out a collective sigh of relief. The first part of the plan had worked. But the battle wasn't over. The remaining alien warships reeled from the explosion, but they weren't done yet. The gap left by the destroyed vessel was immediately filled by the others, which charged toward the Triton with renewed fury. Hayes knew they couldn't stay in the field for long. Too many alien ships were closing in. They needed to finish what they started. "Davis, take us out of here," Hayes commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Back toward the power core. We'll use the explosion as a cover." Davis immediately initiated the evasive maneuvers, bringing the Triton around and heading back toward the base. The remaining alien ships pursued, but the Triton had the speed it needed. The asteroid field now acted as a chaotic backdrop, with asteroids bursting into pieces from near misses. Each time they narrowly dodged a blast, the ship seemed to grow more alive, the crew's coordinated efforts pulling them through danger. "Captain, the fleet's not slowing down," Marks warned, his tone tight. "They're locking on with heavier firepower. If we don't do something soon, they'll catch us." Hayes's mind raced. They had one option left, one last risk to take. "Prepare for a reverse assault," she said. "Marks, I want everything we've got on the secondary weapons array. We're going to make them regret chasing us." Marks quickly adjusted the targeting systems, rerouting power to the secondary weapons. The Triton's rear-facing turrets flared to life, charging up as the crew's nerves tightened. "We're locked on," Marks said. "Ready to fire." "Do it," Hayes ordered. With a loud crack, the rear turrets erupted in a burst of fire, sending a series of high-energy blasts toward the pursuers. The alien ships had underestimated the Triton's firepower, expecting the small vessel to rely solely on its speed and agility. But they had no idea that the Triton still had some tricks up its sleeve. The blasts tore into the alien fleet, catching one of the pursuing ships off guard. It exploded in a fiery ball of debris, the shockwave sending smaller fragments into the surrounding ships. The remaining warships swerved, trying to avoid the debris, but it bought the Triton precious seconds. "Now's our chance," Hayes said, her voice clear and resolute. "Davis, push us to maximum speed. We're getting out of here." The Triton shot forward, faster than ever before, its engines roaring as it moved away from the remaining alien ships. The crew could feel the rush of adrenaline, but they knew it wasn't over yet. The power core was about to explode, and they needed to be far away before that happened. Hayes glanced at the countdown timer. 5 minutes. "Let's make it count," she muttered. The Triton rocketed through space, its engines firing at full throttle as it tore away from the alien fleet. The pursuing ships, slowed by the debris and chaos they had caused, struggled to keep up. For the moment, the Triton was free, but the countdown to the core's destruction was relentless. Hayes glanced at the timer again. 3 minutes left. The core wasn't just a power source. It was the heart of the entire alien installation, and its destruction would send a shockwave through their forces. But Hayes knew that shockwave would be a double-edged sword. The Triton needed to be far enough away to survive, but not so far that they missed the blast. "Davis, how much further?" Hayes demanded, her voice steady despite the pressure. "We're almost out of range of the asteroid field," Davis responded, his fingers moving with quick precision over the controls. "I can push us further, but I need to make sure we're not flying straight into the rest of the enemy fleet. They'll be too focused on the debris from the other ships. We've got one last chance to slip away before the explosion," Mark said, his eyes scanning the tactical display. "They're still coming. They won't give up easily." "We're not letting them catch us," Hayes said, determination settling in her voice. "Prepare for a hard burn. Full power to the engines, Davis. We need to get clear." Davis gritted his teeth, slamming the controls forward. The Triton surged ahead, its speed increasing as the engines hummed louder. The crew held on tight, feeling the ship's power surge through every system, the metallic groan of the hull vibrating beneath them. The ship felt alive, as though it too were fighting for its survival. In the distance, the alien fleet continued to pursue, but they were still at least 2 minutes behind. Hayes knew the Triton could outrun them now if they just kept pushing. But even as they sped ahead, a sense of unease gnawed at her. The fleet had shown its adaptability. There was no way to know for sure if the enemy had any more surprises in store. "Anything on the scanners?" Hayes asked, eyes never leaving the view ahead. Marks was already working the console. "Nothing new, just the remaining enemy ships. But they're slower now. They're disorganized after the last wave. We should be able to pull away, but we need to be fast." Just then, an alert pinged on the tactical display, and Mark's face tightened. "Captain, we got a new signal. It's coming from the core." "Explain," Hayes snapped. "It's a secondary detonation," Mark said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The core's explosion. It's not just going to be a standard blast. It's a multi-phase shockwave. The blast radius is expanding." "What the hell are you saying?" Davis shot back. "We're already at full throttle. If it's expanding." "We need to move now," Hayes ordered, her heart racing. "Davis, full burn, immediately. Go as far as you can." Davis didn't hesitate. His hands flew over the controls, and the Triton jerked forward even faster, engines roaring as the ship broke through the atmosphere of the planet, narrowly avoiding the expanding shockwave that had begun to ripple outward. The ship's hull vibrated violently as the blast radius expanded, sending shockwaves through space. 2 minutes, Marks warned. "We're not out of the woods yet. The explosion is spreading in all directions. We need to get at least 3 light minutes away before it hits." The crew worked in synchronized tension. Every breath and movement matched to the urgency of the moment. The countdown was relentless. The seconds ticked by like a drumbeat in Hayes' mind. "Davis, take us into a quantum jump range," Hayes commanded. "We can't risk getting too close." Davis's hands flew across the console as the Triton systems began preparing for a quantum jump. A small dark corner of Hayes' mind was occupied with the idea of what would happen if they didn't make it in time. What if the Triton couldn't escape the expanding shockwave? She forced the thought away. They had made it this far. They would make it through this last challenge too. As the final seconds approached, the tension in the control room thickened. Marks worked frantically, aligning the quantum engines for a jump that would carry them far enough to avoid the explosion's full force. "We're ready to jump," Marks said, voice filled with a hint of hope. Hayes nodded, her voice calm and firm. "Do it. Now." With a flash of light, the Triton surged forward, leaving the shockwave behind as the ship leaped into faster-than-light travel. The entire crew felt the jolt of the quantum jump, the sudden weightlessness of the jump taking them out of the expanding blast radius. For a moment, everything felt suspended, quiet in the cold vacuum of space. Then the Triton emerged from the jump, and the control room was filled with a deep, satisfied silence. Hayes exhaled slowly, her pulse still racing. They had done it. They had made it out alive. Status report, Hayes ordered. Marks checked his console. We're in a safe zone, Captain. The explosion should have cleared our previous location. We're free and clear. Davis allowed himself a brief smile. We actually did it, Captain. We're alive. Hayes took a moment to let the weight of the victory settle in. They had survived against impossible odds. But as she looked out at the vast emptiness of space, she knew this was only one battle in a much larger war. The Triton had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve, no matter the odds. But there was more work to be done. Much more. As the Triton floated in the silence of space, the crew took a collective breath, the weight of their escape finally sinking in. They had done the impossible. Against all odds, they had not only survived but also crippled the alien fleet's offensive. But Hayes knew the battle was far from over. Status check, everyone, Hayes said, her voice steady, but the fatigue was beginning to show in her tone. Marks was the first to respond, his fingers moving swiftly over the console. All systems are online and functioning within normal parameters, Captain. The quantum jump has stabilized the ship. No signs of immediate damage from the shockwave. Good. Hayes nodded, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. They had made it through the heart of the storm, but she knew this was just the beginning. Their mission was far from complete. Davis, still gripping the controls, looked over at her, his eyes bright with a mixture of relief and curiosity. What's next, Captain? Do we head back to base or? Hayes turned her gaze forward, out into the vast expanse of space, where only the endless stars and a quiet silence greeted them. No, Davis, we can't go back yet. Not until we know for sure the alien forces have been dealt with. We still don't know the full extent of their invasion plans. They're not going to just stop because we blew up one ship. Agreed, Marks added, looking up from his console. The alien fleet is still a major threat. We may have crippled their offensive, but they'll regroup. They'll be planning their next move. We've bought ourselves time, but we need to strike while the iron's hot, Hayes said, her eyes narrowing. We're going to have to hit them where it hurts. We know their command center is in the Andromeda sector. That's where their main fleet is regrouping. Davis nodded, still absorbing the information. You think we can take on an entire fleet, Captain? With just us? Hayes gave him a determined look. We just took down the flagship of their fleet with a single shot. We've got the technology, the firepower, and the element of surprise. We'll strike fast and hard. We'll disable their main base, cut off their supply lines, and cripple their leadership. If we do this right, we can end the threat once and for all. The crew exchanged looks, a shared understanding passing between them. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a fight for their survival, for the survival of humanity itself. Hayes had seen their resolve harden over the past few hours, and she knew that, despite the odds, they were ready to take on whatever came next. Mark spoke again, breaking the silence. I can start running tactical scans on the Andromeda sector. We'll need all the intel we can get before heading in. The sooner we gather that, the better. Do it, Hayes said, her eyes sharpening. Davis, set a course for the Andromeda sector. We're going in. The Triton's engines powered up again, the ship slowly turning toward their new destination. The crew was still recovering from the intense fight they had just survived, but there was no time to rest. The enemy would not wait. The alien forces, while wounded, were still a formidable threat. And Hayes knew better than anyone that every moment they wasted could mean the difference between life and death. As the Triton began its journey toward the Andromeda sector, Hayes stood silently at the command station, her mind racing. The aliens were relentless, but humanity had something they didn't: tenacity. The human spirit could not be broken. And with the crew of the Triton behind her, Hayes was confident they could push through any obstacle that came their way. Their survival had been a testament to their will to fight. But this next mission, this next fight, would be the one that defined the course of the war. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about winning. about proving that humanity could rise up against any force, no matter how overwhelming. Hayes turned to face her crew, her voice resolute. This isn't just our fight. It's everyone's. We've shown them what humanity is capable of. Now let's finish what we started. The crew stood tall, their faces set with the same unyielding determination. The Triton was no longer the weakest ship. It had become a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for all those who had been oppressed by the alien forces. And together, they would bring the fight to the enemy, no matter where it led them. The battle for humanity's future was far from over, but with the crew of the Triton at the helm, victory was within reach.